What up, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of our brand new segment called Shit I Learned in Prison. Today, we are going to be talking about the power of mental atmosphere, moving mountains, and the freeing art of not giving a fuck. Now, for those of you who don't know, for the past 5 years, I have been using acting and improv as a way of teaching behavioral intervention in maximum security prison. Now, as you can imagine, the atmosphere of prison is extremely intense. The second you walk in, you see things like barbed wire fences, cold stone floors, and a bunch of people chained and shackled together with their heads down and their bodies tightened like this. With the atmosphere being what it was, I wasn't sure how down these inmates were going to be playing acting games. You know, my fear was that I walked in and said, "All right, everybody, we're gonna do some theater stuff." And they would look at me and be like, no the fuck we aren't. The first thing that caught me by surprise was how warmly I was welcomed. From the second I walked into the door, I was met with so much gratitude for me even putting on the class, because if it wasn't for that, they'd essentially be stuck in a cell all day. It's extremely important for the work I do that we come in with a lot of energy and that people have their mind open so that we can explore creative outlets. However, because of the atmosphere these guys were in, as you can imagine, they were so hardened. Everyone was sitting around like this. So the first thing I had to do was figure out a way to get people out of this stone cold exterior they found themselves in. The first thing I have them do is simply sit up. You see, in acting, we learn about this thing called the body-mind connection, which means that your body is communicating to your mind at all times, and your emotions follow suit. So the brain becomes energized to link with the information that the body's giving it. The second I made them sit up, you saw an immediate change in the energy of the room. Now, the next thing I would do is teach the guys about energy itself. So if they're resting, that energy is just sitting in their body waiting to be used. But the second we start moving around, the energy starts coming alive and flowing through us. I'd make them start clapping. From there, I'd make them go faster and faster and faster until we are moving and clapping like maniacs. And at that point, the energy is flowing and alive. From there, their body and their minds are completely opened up, and we're able to start playing around like crazy. I would have them doing wild things like writing numbers in the air with their bodies, running around making animal noises, being as silly as we possibly could. Now, admittedly, none of these guys were interested in acting professionally, but simply opening them up to that playful spirit yielded unbelievable results. I was seeing men with tattoos on their face rolling around on the floor. I was seeing people who had the most hardened life experience you could imagine softening up and laughing like children again. Now, at first, some people were still hesitant to kind of get into it. And this is something that I've seen no matter where I've taught acting. I've had the pleasure of teaching acting everywhere from preschools to high schools to colleges to prisons. And the one thing that I found that's so interesting is that when I tell children to be goofy, and I'm talking from preschool to second grade, they have no problem with it. In fact, it becomes a free-for-all party on who can be crazier. I'll say, "Make your craziest face," and all of a sudden everyone goes, "Ah, look at me, look at this, ah," and they start freaking out, and it's so much fun. But then this phenomenon happens around third grade, and it stays all the way to adulthood, which is where I say, "All right, everybody, make your craziest face," and they all do this. They all look around to see if other people are doing it. Now, I told my guys in prison about that, and I asked them what they thought it was. And they hit the nail right on the head. They said, "We're so afraid of what other people think." And what I realized right away was that fear is exactly what was holding them back from letting their creative ideas flow freely. So we made our first 2 rules right there in that jail cell. Number 1 most important rule to self-expression and creativity is what other people think. Plain and simple. There's nothing that's going to hold you back from expressing your ideas freely more than wondering what other people are going to think of you if you do. So that's rule number 1. And rule number 2 is be as silly as you can. If it feels stupid, you're doing it right. The second we busted down that door with those 2 rules, it was a free-for-all. I saw men rolling around on the floor. We saw people jumping up and down, screaming, laughing. It was like a Def Jam comedy concert in that place. It was amazing. Yet still there was one guy who I couldn't get to participate. Now, you know when you hear about going to prison, it's always important to find the biggest, strongest, scariest guy and get him on your side. This was him. I don't remember his real name. He was about 6'7", made of muscles, tattooed up to his neck, and he never blinked. He just stared around like this. They called him the Mountain. I don't know if it's because he looked exactly like the Game of Thrones character, or if it's because he was just a giant who looked like he was carved out of stone. But regardless, this dude never spoke. And I was worried about it. Because before any of the other guys in class would make a move or would make a choice, they'd look over to Mountain, and Mountain would give them and then they would do it. Almost like they had to get his permission before they did anything. Now, even though he didn't participate, luckily, he was giving people permission to participate in the class. So he seemed to be cool with it on some level, but I wasn't exactly sure how I could get him involved. But so long as he kept encouraging everybody else, I was fine with it. So we went at it. We moved around, we started energizing ourselves. And the crazy thing was, when we started moving and playing like children again, they started feeling like children again. I mean, giggles, goofiness, imagination running wild. We started creating scenes of us on the moon or us riding dragons or whatever we could imagine. And the cool thing is, once you open up your mind to creativity and you open up your heart and you open up your spirit, you're able to open up about yourself. And this created a discussion about some of their lives and childhoods. And as they started sharing their stories, I started hearing things that it took my breath away. I started hearing guys talking about seeing their brothers stabbed in front of them when they were 8 years old. I heard things about guys talking about how they've been involved with gangs since they were 6. Stories about how they were abandoned by their parents, raised by the streets, had nobody to look up to except for dope dealers. And it was at that point I realized it's not just the atmosphere in prison that was affecting their attitudes. It was the atmosphere they grew up in that was affecting their lives. I started thinking about my own childhood and the atmosphere I grew up in. And I couldn't help but wonder, if I was born in their condition, would I be in the exact same place they are right now? This hit me pretty deeply, and I thank them for sharing their stories and their hardships. And after the class was over, I went and gave certificates to everybody. Now, the class was just 3 or 4 days long, and admittedly, I personally didn't see the point of handing out certificates for a 4-day class. It was even so much that I went up to my boss and said, hey, do we have to give out these certificates? I mean, all we did was play a bunch of goofy theater games. But my boss looked at me in the eyes and said, you got it all wrong. The certificate's the most important part. She told me there was once a 46-year-old man who came up to her in tears after the certificate ceremony and said, can you please just send this to my mother? Because it's the first thing I've ever gotten in my entire life with my name on it that she can put up on the refrigerator and be proud of. That's the atmosphere that he grew up in. And that's the gift we were offering, was a change in that. So we did the ceremony, gave the certificates, and if everybody chose to, they could give a speech saying what the class meant to them, what they learned. And I heard some amazing things. I heard some people say that if they would have known about this when they were younger, maybe they wouldn't be here right now. I heard other people say that they haven't laughed that much in years and they forgot what it was like to feel that good. That was rewarding enough. But then it was the mountain's turn. And he got up and walked towards us like an H.P. Lovecraft statue come to life, marching with those big staring eyes. I have yet to hear this dude speak. We hand him his certificate, and he looks at us and says, "I got something to say." Everybody in the room was horrified. You could feel the chills jolt through everyone's spines, and we all stood at attention to hear what the mountain had to say. All he did was look at us and say, "For the past few days, I forgot I was in prison, and I gotta thank you for that." And he sat down. And that was it. The poet Milton has a saying, which is, "The mind is an amazing thing. It can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven." And in those 4 days, I saw these people who were in the worst place you could possibly imagine be full of joy, full of light, full of positivity and laughter. And I realized everybody lives in a prison, a cage of the mind. And that's the first place that we need to be freed from. I realized that there are people and there are others who are in real life cages, who are some of the happiest and most fulfilled people simply because of their mindset. It was an unbelievable lesson, and it taught me so much about what I can be grateful for and the way I think about things on a daily basis. And that's why I want to share it with you. Step 1, if you ever feel like you have no energy or no enthusiasm to do anything, just sit up. Start moving your body. Start shaking things up, shaking things around. If you move your body, your mind will follow suit. Step 2, what other people think. Take that creativity you have in your mind, those awesome ideas, and just start spreading them around as much as possible. Number 3, if it feels stupid, you're doing it right. And number 4, remember, so long as you can maintain that mental freedom, it doesn't matter what your outside circumstances are. You will always be free. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for supporting the cause. As you can imagine, because of COVID-19, things hit us pretty hard, and we did have to halt the program for a while, and we're currently trying to raise funds. So, if this is something that pulls on your heart, if it is something that you believe in, and if it is something that you'd like to help out with, I did leave the link for the GoFundMe in the description. So click on that and feel free to donate. Anything helps. Anything helps. The sooner we can get back to the jails, the sooner we can get back to doing this work. So if you would like to help out, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so, so much. Thank you for listening. I love you all with all of my heart. And remember, this machine kills fascists.